Okay, welcome to the Esports Research Report. I'm Dr. Brian McCauley here at the Media Management and Transformation Center in Jönköping in Sweden, the city of DreamHack. And with me today, I have two members and leaders of the Lero Lab at the University of Limerick in Ireland, which is Europe's first esports lab. So Dr. Mark Campbell and Dr. Adam Toth, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Brian.
Hi, Brian.
So first question, and we'll start with you, Mark. What's your definition of esports? What's esports to you?
Yeah, esports is competitive computer gaming. Done through the medium of cyberspace. So there has to be a competitive element to it, and there's that competitive element doesn't need to be strictly professional or semi-professional. I think once there's a competitive element to it at all, so it can be people playing at home with their friends.
So I like that because that means I play esports without competing officially. Adam, what way would you define esports that could be different to Mark's?
I guess very much similar to what Mark said. I think it's just sport in a digital environment, and I guess it's what you define sport as. For me, sport is any activity that's done or participated in a competitive way. So you can have more athletic sports and less athletic sports, but if you're competing at them, even chess can be considered a sport. And for esports, then for me, that's just competition in a digital environment.
Of course, esports started when we all had the Commodore 64s years ago, when you said, when you die, it's my turn. So you're always competing to stay on with your siblings.
Yeah.
So Mark, what's your background before you got into esports? Where did you come from in terms of research and stuff?
Yeah, so I studied psychology in UCD in Dublin in Ireland, and my background research-wise was kind of in cognitive sports psychology, for want of a better term. So it was around thinking and decision making and what feeds into the expertise levels of performers. My PhD was looking at golf and golf putting, was looking at using eye tracking and things like that. And then I started in University of Limerick, 11 years ago, and I'm working in sport and human performance, I suppose. So there was lots of opportunities across those domains. So, I started with a background in golf, and, about just a little over 6 years ago now, we started the Lero Esports Science Research Lab. So I've been in esports for just over 6 years now, and we're looking at other domains at the moment as well. We're looking at surgery and enhancing expertise or surgery skills as well. So there's that whole spectrum of human performance really interests me now, not just sport.
And Adam, I know your background's in golf according to your Twitter feed, where you love to showcase where you've been golfing every weekend. But what was your background in terms of research and academia before you got into all this?
Yeah, of course. So I don't know if the accent gives it away, but I'm not Irish, I guess. So not yet anyways, applying for citizenship this year. I did my PhD in Canada at the University of Guelph in neuroscience and biomechanics, where I guess my thesis really focused around sensory motor control for controlling kind of posture, balance, movement, and kind of both in kind of young and older adult populations. And yeah, I guess 6 years ago then, I kind of followed my wife, my now wife here, and was in chats with Mark actually about doing a postdoc originally in golf actually. And I guess serendipitously enough, there was an opportunity for funding to get onto a project in esports. And I remember the interview or the conversation over Zoom from Canada at like 6 a.m. in the morning. I remember asking them, what is an esport? What is that all about? And they just said they needed me to fly to Boston, to PAX, to do kind of the first data collection. We were doing some surveys at the time, and yeah, a whole new world was opened up to me. And yeah, 6 years later, it's nice to be able to kind of, I guess partner with Mark in the areas that he's has expertise in with cognition expertise, and my interests predominantly lie around kind of sensory motor control, but also neurostimulation. So to be able to kind of marry up our our different interests and do some cool research over the last number of years has been awesome. Yeah.
I mean, wow, complicated subjects. By the way, I didn't know you weren't Irish. I've been 20 years away from Ireland. I just thought you were from some weird little town that was a bit isolated and had developed its own Irish accent. So you're not sounding as Canadian as you think, my friend.
Okay.
Really, so the Lero Lab, how did this start? What is it? What do people need to know about this? Because it was Ireland's first esports lab, and it's set in the University of Limerick, where I spent 3 weeks doing a French language course one summer, and that's about the only time I've been there. So how did this all start, and what's happening?
Yeah, so it started in 2016. Lero is the Centre, Science Foundation Ireland Centre for Software Research. So it's headquartered here at the University of Limerick, but it encompasses all of the universities in Ireland. So it's a big research centre. It's funded by Science Foundation Ireland, and they're very much into software research, but they're very and software engineering, but they're very much into kind of interdisciplinary research. So this idea of where software can make a difference and so on. And back around this time, they have a big push towards industry collaboration. So what they do is they offer a nice funding model, a like-for-like funding. So for every euro that industry invests, they will match that if it's, on an agreed project with an agreed research team and so on. So Logitech would have partnered up with us initially. They wanted to look at the original project was called Deriving and Evaluating Key Performance Indicators in Esports. So very, very broad. But essentially, we started as a 1-year project with Logitech, and we extended that for a year, and then we extended that for 3 years, and we've just signed up for another 3 years. So we've a nice 8-year working relationship with Logitech, and we're looking at all aspects of gaming, really, of esports and gaming. We look at it, particularly, like Adam said, kind of from that neurocognitive performance point of view. But we've also, we have a big multidisciplinary team of 8 full-time researchers at the moment. So we have software engineers and data analysts and neuroscientists and psychologists and so on. So, essentially what we did with Logitech is we design software tests that measure individual gaming skills so that we could kind of, quantify or empirically, evaluate each of what we consider to be important esports skills, such as target acquisition or flicking or mouse tracking or, all these things we talk about, all the time as being important in esports, and whether or not they actually are important, so we would, that original trip to PAX was to talk to decent gamers and find out from them what they consider to be the most important parts of esports. Now, esports is so huge. We spent the first 5 years really focused in on FPS and eventually on Counter-Strike, and that's where we got to with the paper. And Logitech then obviously launched Playmaster, a beta version of Playmaster last year. So that would have been developed here in Lero and at the University of Limerick. So we're very, very proud of that and the continuing relationship with them. And we have additional industry partners. Since then, we're kind of growing as a lab, which is great.
So I have to be nice to you now, because if I want to move back to Ireland at some stage, you're the best bet to get a job somewhere. I mean, Playmaster. I really, really like that platform is teaching me how bad I am at jumping and peaking in CS:GO. I mean, Mark, we've talked about this before, but Adam, are you any good at the jumping level in Playmaster? Can you handle it?
Oh, I'm terrible at it. I'm one of those do as I say, not as I do when it comes to esports. I'm not very good, and I suppose yourself. I'm spending my weekends playing a bit more golf than esports, so trying to narrow my focus to one thing at a time, I guess.
I mean, so the principles you come across in a lot of these sort of experiments, like, can you apply them yourselves to your golf game then? If we have to sort of put our hands up, say we're too old and it's the next generation's turn to be PC gamers. I mean, are the kind of findings in a lot of these studies cross-applicable to golf or football or any sort of other sport?
Yeah, definitely. I assume they're putting that question to me. I think one of the things that, if we go back 5-6 years now to when we started, and we looked at how players practiced, the majority of them would just practice by playing the game more, playing scrims with their friends. And when you're considering any kind of motor skill, we know from the literature, and we know from traditional sport that deliberate practice of specific isolated skill sets and then kind of marrying them up into kind of more complex tasks and eventually into a scrimmage environment seems to produce better results over the long term with training. People will accelerate their improvement more doing that kind of strategy, that kind of deliberate practice and kind of variable practice skills training than just playing the game more. So that was kind of the thrust behind the first collaboration and project with Logitech. And thinking about then esports at the time, esports was just kind of lumped in as like esports. And what we pretty quickly realized was that League of Legends or MOBA games or FPS games or RTS games, they didn't necessarily share all the same fundamental skills. You could actually treat each of those genres or each of those games as their own sport with potentially some overlapping skill sets, just like you would have to run in soccer versus football. But there are distinct skill sets that are required for those specific game genres or games. And I guess to answer your question, it's really trying to parse all that out and figure out what are those kind of fundamental or key skills that maybe players should start focusing on or tracking their progress on or using it to identify talent in those games.
I mean, there's a good analogy was David Beckham, the Manchester United footballer, and how he would stay back after training to practice his free kicks, or how Dennis Bergkamp at Arsenal, you know, the younger players would say, look, here's one of Europe's top players, and he's staying back to practice certain shooting drills. Or I remember watching Andy Cole in a documentary, just doing the same movement over and over just to be able to tap a ball into the net from 5 yards. And you know, it's the same principles that are applied in esports, that you identify what you are good at and improve, and identify what you're weak at and can actually, you know, improve through that. And I say for CSGO, I mean, the biggest breakthrough for me was practicing spray patterns with the AK. To learn the actual thing. That was where I should have started. And if I could go back in time, I'd spend 3 weeks just spraying with the AK in a workshop. But that's, and so what you're doing is actually cutting through that, having to learn what you should have done, and it actually provides the guide. I mean, so let's just start with the first paper. Is Adam, you're the first author, and Mark, you're in there too, and it was in Computers and Human Behavior, the effect of expertise training and neurostimulation on sensory motor skills in esports. This is my favorite paper in terms of my own gaming life, because this is the one where you said gold Nova 4 is the threshold. Once you reach that, you're highly skilled. And once I read that, I just went, I have to reach gold Nova 4 and make Mark admit I'm a highly skilled player. So I reached it, and you know, I was playing with a good team, of course, which is the key, which is an element that wasn't there. But I was also the top scorer or a decent scorer in that team, so I wasn't being boosted. So what were the key takeaways from that paper that I've got referenced to explain my own ineptitude, really?
Yeah, I'll come in first before Adam describes it a bit. But we had published a paper on boosting before that, Brian. So my concern when you got to gold Nova 4 was that you might have, you know, used illicit means to get there, you know.
No, I was avoiding my Smurf friends at the time. I did avoid playing with a couple of friends who were Smurfs I met in the game, and I avoid them because I wanted to do it honestly. And if I'd been the weakest player every time, I still would have felt I was boosted, but I wasn't. So, yeah, I mean, boosting, for anyone who doesn't know, is when a higher skilled player helps another player rank up by being so good at the game, most commonly used by Smurfs, right?
Yeah, or takes over your account and plays as you for, you know, a period of time to get the level up to a certain point. Yeah.
I mean, that's just, I never understood that, because it's like the equivalent of, you know, imagine you're working out in a gym and then you take over from The Rock in WWF and you get your ass handed to you. It just seems like a redundant activity in terms of suddenly you're playing with these totally players who would destroy you. Is that not an issue that comes up?
I think it's a short-term gain for a bit of status or whatever amongst your peers or social kind of thing. But then obviously it's long-term pain because you can't stay there at all.
Mm-hmm.
And so Adam, as the lead author, this is obviously your baby, which is a great study. What could you tell us about this study that maybe key points that people could understand that are important?
Yeah, I guess the three takeaways, to try and distill it down, I'd be one to waffle now. The first one is it's the first paper really to quantify the difference between expertise, the effect of training, and the effect of neurostimulation on a prominent esports skill. So target acquisition or flicking, I think it's pretty well agreed now that's an important skill for first person shooter performance. So the first thing that we saw was that we were able to differentiate expertise within the game. So if we dichotomize the ranks, the 18 ranks in CSGO, we could actually distinguish whether someone was in the upper tier of the ranks or the lower tier ranks, and then also differentiate them from non-gamers, just based on that one skill. So that was the cool part, is that the rank really encompasses all of the skills that you would employ during the game, and you get your rank through your gameplay. And the fact that we could evaluate you in 10 minutes performing one skill in that game and be able to tell fairly convincingly whether you were in one group or the other, I think was pretty compelling. The second part was the effective training. So deliberate practice of that skill for 10 minutes a day for 5 days, you could, regardless of what group you were in, you were going to significantly benefit from that training, that concerted training effort. So that was really cool to be able to show that in all groups, and to also be able to show where you'd actually start noticing the differences. So you notice it earlier on for non-gamers because they have more room to improve, but even for low skilled gamers, as we're calling them in the paper, or the elites, they were able to improve by that 4th, 5th day. So again, within 1 week, you're seeing massive improvements there, which is really cool to see. And then the last bit, which is maybe the more complex part, but the part of neurostimulation, what we're seeing is that this idea of using transcranial direct current stimulation.
Okay, you got to break this one down for me. I was thinking, Stanford prison experiments with electrodes and stuff. Reading that, I was like, not my area. But so to break this down into absolute dummy terms for myself and a few other people who might also struggle.
Yeah, perfect. So to distill this part down, when we're, I guess in a simplified way, when we're learning motor tasks, we will perform a motor task. Let's say it's a flicking or even throwing a ball, right? So if you're throwing a ball at a target, as soon as you throw that ball, you're going to get feedback about whether or not you've hit the target. You're going to get feedback from your limbs, proprioception, about how your limbs moved to create the action to throw the ball. And you're going to get feedback about whether that was successful or not. And then the next time you generate a motor program or a new set of actions to try and throw the ball more accurately, you're going to update that motor program and try again. And as you continually repeat that task, you're going to continually get feedback that's going to update your motor program. And then you're going to send out a new motor program that hopefully will be more accurate than the last attempt at it. And the idea, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, how do you measure this?
Yeah, so you can measure it like really crudely just through performance. So you look at the change of performance over time. Same thing that we were doing across the days, the 5 days with the flick task there in the training study. So we can look at the improvement in performance over time. Now, neurologically, there's a number of things that are happening from the neural signal has to go back to the brain. Then there's a neural cascade that has to basically, you have to interpret that information and then send signals over to your motor cortex, which is the part of the brain that's responsible for sending the final signal down to your muscles to produce action. So there's this whole kind of cascade of neural signaling in the brain that has to happen. And that neural cascade gets updated and solidified as we learn a task and get better at it. What TDCS is doing, or transcranial electric stimulation, is we are actually applying really small electrical currents to the surface of the brain to change the neural excitability of those neurons. And if you think back to like first year neuroscience, this whole idea you've probably heard before, what fires together wires together. So the idea is that by getting those same connections to fire together more often, you start to build stronger connections between those neurons. So what we're doing with the motor cortex is we are making those neurons in the motor cortex more easily able to be turned on or activated. And what that's doing is it's facilitating the building of the connections of that pathway, the strengthening of that pathway. And we've seen it with a number of kind of bimanual motor tasks, whether it be music, whether it be golf, with other things, where if you supply this neurostimulation while you're doing the training, you'll actually see accelerated improvements compared to just the training alone. So you see that when you train, you're going to get better at something. You put more time into it, you're going to learn and you're going to improve at it. But the cool thing is that when you supplement with this neurostimulation, you actually get better at a faster rate than if you were just training alone. And that was something that we saw particularly with our non-gamer group in this study, and that was really exciting.
Just to come back to these electric shocks, I mean, do you actually feel them at all?
You do a little bit. Generally, when you have the positioning very well and you're over the motor cortex, you generally don't feel very much, or you might feel a little kind of just local kind of sensation on the skin due to the electric current. But generally, that subsides pretty quickly.
We did a check in the paper, while we did the study. Did people realize that they were in the stimulation group or the non-stimulation group? And participants weren't able to tell, on average across the study whether they were in the stim group or not. So they weren't able to feel it. Yeah. But there might be a slight kind of a tingle, but it's really low level. It sounds like we're electrocuting people, and
I'm seeing a big red lever, and you're going, Adam, don't push that all the way now. Don't. No, come on, just once. So like this is actually really fascinating, right? So like, let's talk about how you could actually apply this in real life. I mean, I talk to my students. I say, look, you're not going to remember everything you learn in a degree, in social sciences, in the softer sciences like marketing. And I always say that, but when you're talking about Porter's 5 forces or theory of communication, it's firing neurons and building pathways in your brains to be able to evaluate and think about stuff, right? But this is literally this current is kind of making this process better for these certain actions. So like, in terms of, is this something like where you get a surgeon practicing and they have this small hat on and as they're practicing micro sutures or something that, they can get better at that stuff because, is this the sort of applications, or am I going too far?
Yeah, you're on the right track there, Brian. Yeah, basically, like we partnered with Halo Neuroscience, who would be a brain stimulation tech company, and they have a headset just like one you're wearing there. And that applies the current over your motor cortex. So it's a commercially available device that you can buy and you can use yourself. So it's not this Frankenstein type lab type setup, but when we can show differences in that kind of motor cortex for sensory motor skills, for gaming and flicking using a mouse with your fingers and your wrist and your arm, like, it's a really logical next step would be to look at it in terms of surgical skills, or in particular laparoscopic surgery skills, which we're looking at the moment, and we're seeing some very early exciting results there as well. But like, there's two ways of doing it. You do it either immediately before they do the activity, so you control what they're doing, so we can control their cognition while they're receiving the stimulation. We get them to do a crossword, or whatever. And then for about an hour afterwards, they can benefit from the stimulation. So immediately after getting stimulated in a quiet kind of sitting position, they then go and do their task of flicking or playing esports or surgical skills.
What about disc golf? What if I sort of got one of these, did it for half an hour playing CS:GO, and then went out and practiced my stroke on disc golf? Would that possibly benefit me? I mean, is this kind of the future of how to get better at stuff?
Yeah, theoretically, I mean, the field is still fairly early, I guess, and it's still fairly early days.
It's pretty cool though. Could you do it before you go on a first date?
Well, I guess the technology has been actually applied successfully for a lot of things. So for affecting cognitive abilities, for affecting mood. There's actually a company called Flow Neuroscience who are using the technology in conjunction with CBT therapy to kind of help treat depression. So I
actually saw that study. I saw that the small electrical shocks are proven to be very beneficial for people with depression. That was recent. That was amazing. I mean, so you guys are kind of at this really amazing stuff that is potentially very beneficial with esports is where you're starting with it, right?
Exactly, yeah. So esports is just one of the other skills. So when we're targeting the motor cortex and we're looking at movements, so to answer your disc golf question, theoretically, yeah, you could be using this to train and improve your disc golf at a faster rate than if you were training without the stimulation, based on the work that we're doing here.
Yeah, and I suppose, Brian, the great thing about esports and gaming is it's a wonderful natural lab to study lots of phenomena, particularly human behavior, you know, because there's so many parts you can control. You have a record of all what they did, the inputs, you know, that high level human computer interaction is a really fascinating space, you know, and there's such broader implications for it, but esports is a lovely way to do that, or gaming, you know.
We've got a elite esports athlete program starting here at my university, so I'm immediately going to be sending this podcast to the Owen Southgate, the director of JU Sports, say, look, we got to get these. I got to use them for my own stuff. Then that's the whole advantage. So look, we're talking about the depression, which brings me on to this really lovely recent paper you did in JMIR Serious Games. I was on gaming and mental health, and I mean, I'm not going to say what the findings are. I'm going to let you guys describe this paper. I mean, who was in charge of this one, and what was this all about?
Yeah, so I'll start there. I suppose Magdalena Kowal, a research assistant here with us, she's been with us for about 5 years now. She led this project as lead author, and it was a real team effort, I suppose, really, because it was a COVID project. You know, we were in lockdown at the time. We couldn't get into the lab for a couple of months. So as a lab group, we were looking around for, you know, kind of projects we could do at home and reviews and things like that. And Magdalena's big research focus at the moment is kind of mental health and well-being. So we started, you know, scouring the literature for commercial video games, free video games, and what benefits there were, because during early pandemic, WHO came out, you know, and said that, you know, gaming mightn't be so bad after all, or it might be quite good for you. So, you know, it was such a shift from them, you know, a few years previously having, you know, all that kind of addiction and other.
I know. They kind of backtracked on that one a bit.
They have, yeah, but like so we kind of scoured the literature for you know, the potential therapeutic effects of playing commercially available video games, not these bespoke ones which are designed by, you know, psychiatrists or, you know, hospital groups for in a rehab setting, that they're only, you know, that you have to buy. Just commercially available games like your, you know, your Counter-Strikes or your League or whatever. And I suppose the findings were that using these games can be a very nice adjunct to traditional mental health therapies. So to your, you know, your CBTs or your psychopharmacology or whatever it is, they can really add to it. And of course, during a pandemic, when there's huge waiting lists and maybe a lack of access to doctors or medical care, that, you know, this gaming may provide a bit of a bridge in terms of maintaining or sustaining your mental health, and some of these papers kind of bore this out as well. So a really nice kind of a good news review about the wider benefits of gaming, not just for, you know, ranking up and boosting and doing cool things with your motor skills, but also towards warding off the you know, mental health difficulties which might be there. And we had a particular focus on depression and anxiety, I must say. It wasn't just all mental health issues, it was just depression and anxiety.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, look, I found playing CSGO when the pandemic at its height was just fantastic for me, to give me a bit of socializing and stuff like that. So in terms of, we had Animal Crossing and we've had Apex Legends, and is it just the kind of games you like, or is shooting a lot of people better than harvesting turnips or whatever they do in Animal Crossing, which is not my game at all?
Yeah, I think just to come in there, it probably depends on the profile of the player. So, you know, if you're looking to come out of social isolation, a really nice genre of gaming might be one where there's a lot of team effort that goes into it, and maybe there's less of that competitive element. So it might be you know, whatever, Animal Crossing or different types of genres there. But it can depend, and I think people will have a preference for games which help them in the ways that they think they might need help, or that they mightn't even know that they need help. So that kind of social isolation, or the fun element to it, or the idea of mastering some sort of communication skills or motor skills as well.
I mean, I really love, I mean, one of the things I've kind of become more aware of is the pressures of esports recently, that, you know, kids want to get better, parents want their kids to be better. And sometimes the fun element, the escapism element, the therapeutic element of just getting out of your own head. Because games, when we're on a couch watching TV, the dual screening happens. You know, I'm sure you do it yourselves. The phone comes up and you're half watching something, and you're watching something you've seen before, like Sopranos or The Office or Friends, and people are kind of splitting their attention. Whereas games give you that focused, interactive benefit, which I think is so good for people. And you know, it's always fantastic to have people fight back on many flawed studies on the negative impact of games that were, I mean, one guy withdrew a whole load of papers. There was many people pandering to the message. I mean, my favorite is Donald Trump saying they don't have shootings in Japan because they don't have video games, not recognizing that's two of the major big three companies are Japan, and they have their own genres. I love that. You know, not him, but just how stupid it was. Okay, so look, you know, what are the future plans for Lab? I know we had Tim Smithies here, who's doing his PhD on sleep and performance athlete. What are some of the other things that are going to come up that are of interest? And, you know, when are you putting the job applications up so I can come be tested?
Yeah, I guess really when we think about where the lab's going, we're always looking to expand and grow, and looking to take on either new RAs or new PhD students who are interested in applying various skills to esports, or in doing something that's very esports centric from a project perspective. I think Mark and I are kind of a testament to the fact that when you think about esports research and how it started, it was people who were not esports researchers. They were maybe researchers in an adjunct area or in some broader area that are now applying those principles to esports. So I think that's a lot of it. So I think for anyone who's not necessarily doing research in esports or learning about esports in school, because there isn't a collegiate program yet, it's not like you can't get into esports later. You can still take those skills and apply them and do a master's, a PhD in your area of interest within esports. So we're always looking for new project ideas that people bring forward to take on new students and new RAs. We're in talks right now around getting a couple of new projects up and running with various industry partners. Won't divulge too much yet until things are official, but no, look, we're delighted with the progress that the lab's made over the last 5 years, and we just hope to be, I guess, five times bigger than where we are now, I guess, in 5 years' time.
Yeah, I think the challenge actually is, you know, we've spent 5 years and we barely got out of FPS kind of games. You know, we did, you know, good science takes a while. And you know, a bit to your point earlier, Brian, like when we started, like esports research or esports science was the Wild West. You know, there was very little out there, and there was what was out there. Some of it was shoddy enough. So the standard is definitely improving. The Esports Research Network, the couple of esports journals which are out there, they're bringing the standard up, and it's a really exciting kind of place to be in, because there's a lot of research going on, and obviously we'd love to get out and do more research across the different genres of games that are there, because there's different unique skill sets in some of them. And, you know, our focus so far has been on cognitive athletes. You know, gamers are cognitive athletes. They're really they get some serious cognitive benefits from gaming. So we'd love to explore that in more detail, but also have a look at the whole gamer, the whole person kind of research. And you know, we're setting up another kind of a gaming lab at the moment, which is looking at sim racing. So we're going to move into sim racing for a little bit, or have a little bit of a speciality there. So there's really exciting things we're doing. And then we have a few other big projects, hopefully to be announced soon, which will be, you know, 3 or 4 PhDs and, you know, a postdoc or two. So we're really excited about where we're going.
Yeah. I think if we're thinking about like the vision of the lab, or anyone that is looking to get involved with us or work with us, like really we are all about esports health and performance, kind of fostering a deeper understanding and sharing that with people through the work that we do.
I mean, if you remember Peter Ebdon, the snooker player, he won the world championship for the first time at 40, and he said, "What did you do?" He said, "Well, I stopped drinking and I got really fit for the year." And everyone's like, like he came from nowhere because he got really healthy, and it just showed the kind of links between physical health and well-being and cognitive stuff. And I know I keep pulling on all these sports analogies, but we're kind of, applying a lot of sports principles now and seeing that esports is a really good environment to actually explore these further in more controlled settings and more measurable ways. So the final question I have is always the final question of the podcast. And I'll start with you, Mark, is for you, what research, take the lab out of it, just what research would you like to see done? What would you suggest to people that they should think about doing, or what could be done?
I'd definitely like to see more training studies or randomized control trials type of stuff. I'd like to see people with an open science initiative, so pre-register their protocols and their methods, fire up your hypotheses before you actually do the study, get it approved, embrace that kind of open science initiatives which are out there, which are coming. And I'd love to see the effect of training, whether it's physical resistance exercise, different types of training on esports performance or esports health, or both, you know what I mean, like Adam said there. But I'd really like to see that kind of more rigor in terms of esports, and maybe more joined up thinking, so different labs collaborating together on bigger projects.
So I loved, after I talked to Tim about his project about the impact of sleep, and I was keeping a diary playing CSGO, is that every time I stayed up too late reading a book or whatever and didn't get as much sleep, my performance dropped, and I could see that how big an impact it was. And it was actually applicable to me, because I could actually go, oh, maybe I shouldn't play a ranked game right now. I'm tired. I'm not playing. And it's like, that was, someone's research that he's published. And I was able to apply it, which I found fantastic. And also, of course, the Gold Nova 4 thing gave me a goal just to reach it once. So your research has actually kind of been useful for me in terms of applying it to real life. Adam, what about you, and what would you like to see done? How would you like to improve your putting game by experiments?
Well, first, I suppose that thank you for that, for saying that just there. That I think that's the biggest compliment that we can get, that the work that we're doing is having an impact on people's habits or behaviors, and helping them be better people or better gamers. So that's great. I think selfishly for me, to kind of echo Mark, I think when we look at that training study that we described there with the neurostimulation, that was in one skill in one game, right? So while the results are really exciting, I only hope that can be kind of like a springboard for further research, looking at and establishing what is the importance, or what is the importance of all the other skills, and kind of build almost a bit of a map of the relative importance within a game. So of all the skills that you have to employ to be a good FPS player, which ones are most important, which ones are less important, which ones respond better to training, which ones maybe you need to train over longer, you need adjunct stuff. I think there's so much that can be done, and that's just one game. Then you take that to MOBA, to RTS games, to whatever esport that you're playing that you want to get better at. There's research that needs to be done in it, so that we can be better and we can train smarter. So there's that element of it. The open science initiative is a big one for us. It's a kind of a core value with a lot of the work that we're starting to do in the lab. When you look at clinical trial and drug efficacy and stuff like that, when people had to pre-register their clinical trials starting, I think it was the year 2000, you just see a big difference in the number of significant findings in a lot of those drugs. And I think it's a big thing in psychological research and sports science research as well. I think pre-registering will bring about more honesty, I guess, in the findings that are reported in papers and things like that. And I guess selfishly as well, this idea of neurostimulation, it's something that we want to explore more. I know we're doing it in surgery, we've done it in esports. I think we want to continue to see where it can go. We're looking at one type of neurostimulation over one area of the brain, but as I alluded to, we can do different types of stimulation, different waveforms. We can target different areas of the brain for targeting different aspects of health and performance. And I think there's a lot of work that could bring about some cool new discoveries in that area.
Well, thanks very much, Les. That was great. It's fascinating. It's actually really fascinating stuff, and I think I'm going to go electrocute myself and play some Valorant now, see if it improves my game. So, Mark and Adam, thank you very much for your time, and it was a pleasure having you on the podcast.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
Seven,